and God bless you in His Word. Today we are going over a quick recap of chapter 37. Then I will be reading chapter 39. Chapter 38 of Genesis I will be skipping today, and you can read it for yourself. The only reason that I'm skipping it is because the entire story from chapter 37 through chapter 50, which ends the New Testament, is speaking on the life and what it had happened to Joseph. Chapter 38 kind of tells a little story in between that entirety, and the story is speaking of Judah and Tamar. So I'll go ahead and just tell you basically what happens in the story. So Jesus comes from the tribe of Judah. His bloodline follows the lineage of Judah. When you start checking ancestries of such and such begat such and so on, Jesus falls in line with the line of the tribe of Judah. Judah is also the bloodline that King David comes from. So where our Messiah comes from, that God had promised David that there will always be an heir on his throne, or a king on his throne. Christ would be that king. He falls in line to be the one that we've been waiting for. So Judah ends up marrying a woman, and he goes to search for a wife for his son. His son's name is, I believe his name is and it says that he was wicked in the sight of the Lord. So he dies, marries Tamar, has her as his wife, but he dies. The customary thing to do in the Old Testament was when a son died without having an heir for the inheritance or the blessing in the land, that his brother would raise up seed unto his other brother's name, right? So the next brother in line to marry Tamar would have been Onan. The story says that he knew that the child shouldn't have been his, so he goes unto her. So he actually sleeps with her and performs the act, and when he's finished, what he does is he spills his seed on the ground. And this is wicked in the sight of the Lord, and Onan also perishes. He also dies. Judah looks at this as a bad sign. I've given two of my sons to Tamar, and I have one more son. And so he tells her, look, he's still young. How about you wait a few years until he gets a little bit older, and I will give you him. I will promise you to him. Time goes by. Tamar never receives that other son. He gets older and everything. And then as time went by, Judah's wife that he was married to also passes. So an incident happens where he's going with his friend into one of the other towns. He's hanging out with his friends, going into the other town, and he's going to shear his sheep, right? He's taking his sheep with him, and they are going to process probably the fur, shearing the sheep. And it gets mentioned to Tamar, hey, your father-in-law is heading up to this other town to go shear his sheep with his friend, and so on. So what she does is she takes off her widow garments. She conceals herself with a veil, so you can't really see what she looks like or who she is, and she goes into that town. Well, Judah and his friend stumble across her. They take her as a harlot, right? They assume that she is a prostitute, someone who's sleeping around. And so Judah had just, his friends there, probably like, hey, I know what can keep your mind off of your wife's passing. How about you celebrate a little bit or do something on that end? And he makes an arrangement with Tamar, who he doesn't know is his daughter-in-law. And she says, well, what will you give me for sleeping with you, for having this act happen? And he says, I will give you a kid from the flock of the goats, or the sheep. And she says, okay, well, where is it? Well, I don't have it on me right now. Well, what will you promise me until you give me that? She goes, here, give me your staff, give me your signet, and give me your bracelets. And that's what he does. And he goes into her sleeps with her, and they're done. She gets his stuff, and she takes off. So he comes back into town the next day, and he sends his friend to go and bring this animal to her that he had promised, and she's nowhere to be found. And he kind of asked a couple people, "Hey, where was the harlot that was in this town?" And they said, "We don't know what you're talking about. There's never been anybody that's been over here." And so he comes back to Judah and he mentions it to him, and Judah says, "Look, just forget it. Let her have what she already has. At least we look bad, right? Like everybody knows our business and the dirty stuff that we've done, and let's just not run around door to door saying that we're looking for this kind of person." And so he ends up going back home. Time goes by, I think a few months, maybe 3 or so, and Tamar is starting to show. She looks like she's pregnant. So the rumor around the camp goes that Tamar, who was supposed to be widowed, waiting for this other son, has been playing the harlot, right? She's been playing the harlot, she's been sleeping around. So Judah is going to pass judgment on her. Speaks with the council, what should I do? And he's like, well, I think she has to die. This is a bad example. This is not how we're brought up. This is not what we're supposed to do. And she knows better. And she's gonna have to die for that. She's gonna be judged for it. And before this happens, she comes into his tent and she gives him the staff, the signet, and the bracelets, and says, "From the man who gave me these am I with child." Judah realizes that she has been more honorable than he has. She's been more righteous than he has, in the fact that he had always promised her to this younger son and never gave it to her. And here she is, and she missed her chance. And so she did the next best thing, which was still keeping it in the line of the family, or however it went into that part. But she did the right thing. He didn't do the right thing, and yet he was going to judge her for that. So she goes on, she lives. I believe she has 2 children that are twins. One's Perez is the name. I forget what the name of the other one at the moment. But that goes the story of chapter 38 in Genesis, and that is Tamar and Judah. Doesn't really mention Joseph in that part of the story, which is the reason why I was going to skip it. It does have meaning and significance in there, so I do believe that all of these have a meaning of why it's being told to us. It does follow the bloodline of Jesus. I saw just the other day that it kind of has similarities to where I'm seeing Rachel and Leah in that story, where Jacob is deceived by his uncle Laban and gets Leah on his wedding night instead of Rachel. The reason I say that, I see that connection in there, is because here's someone who's supposed to be married, right? Leah was the older. She was also supposed to be married first, right? You would expect her to be married first before Rachel. But here is someone who she's a widow. She was married, but she had her losses. And when she finds out that her father-in-law is in this certain area, she covers herself. And this is kind of the deception that I see. Like, Judah was deceived. He thought that she was just some random person that was in this town. Turns out she was actually his daughter-in-law. Jacob was actually deceived on his wedding day, right? He thought he was getting Rachel, and it turns out it was Leah. But they make an arrangement before they perform the act. And what Judah tells her, she goes, "Well, what will you give me if I do this? If I am joined together with you, if you know me," right? Because that's how they say it in the Bible, right? He knew her, right? He went into her, they knew each other. "What will you give me if I am with you," right? And he says, "A kid from the goats or the sheep," right? And to me, this reminds me of, it says a kid from the flock, a young sheep, more likely. And this reminds me of Christ, right? If I come to be married, we are the bride of Christ, right? we're actually Gentiles are grafted in, right? So we have sons and daughters. We're sons and daughters of the Most High, and so I would see us as being the bride or being like a daughter-in-law grafted into the kingdom. What will you give me if we are joined together? A kid from the flock, right? A sheep from the herd, right? And what does he give? What have we gotten? We've gotten Jesus Christ, right? He went to the cross for us. He died on the cross. Well, what will you give me? What will you give me? Since you don't have that in the story, they didn't have that on you right now. What will you give me in exchange for that, right? So he promised her, right, his signet, his bracelet, and his staff. And to me, these are all attributes of royalty, right? You have the king; he has like his staff, scepter, right? Bracelets, they're usually gold or so on, and a signet usually sounds like ring, like a ring for like a king or something with a symbol on it. In other parts, it says his cord, something that claims the name of him. And this is what we have. We have a promise that he is going to return to us, right? We have a promise of the kingdom, right? Heaven awaits us. We have a promise to be joined again together with him. And so this is what I'm seeing out of the Judah and Tamar story. And this actually just hit me just the other day when I went through the story again. So that's just a quick briefing on chapter 38, going into chapter 38. But let's go ahead and go into let's go do the recap. Recap 37, all the similarities of how it relates to Jesus, right? Jacob, who's known as Israel, has 12 sons. Of the 12, Joseph is, he's 17 at the time. I don't know how old Benjamin is at the time, but Benjamin is the youngest. So Joseph would be number 11 of 12. He's favored by his father. He has an ornamental robe that his dad gives him. Dad didn't give any of the other ones this special attention or this special robe. And this ornamental robe that has many colors, it looks like kingship, royalty. You see all this stuff on it, and he shows. And on top of this, he's probably younger, not doing much of the work in the sense that he's probably in the tent in the house, taken care of by his dad, while the others are out doing all the hard, hot labor, and they feel entitled. Where the older ones, if there's an inheritance, it should fall on us first. It should not have to go to this younger one. He should have, if anything, he should have lesser than us. But here's Joseph, and he sounds very prideful, almost like he's throwing it in their face, that look what Dad gave me, this coat, look at all the stuff that I have. So on top of this, he has a dream. In the dream, they take it as a bad sign for them. He actually has two dreams and is telling the same story. In the dream, they were tying up their sheaves of grain, right? And let's see if I can do this. His was standing upright, right? You have your arms crossed. And all of theirs were honoring him. All of theirs, were bowing to him. So when you look at someone who's standing there and everybody else around him is bowing, they take it with numbers, right? Like if there's 11 of us and yet you're the 12th one and we're all bowing to you, what are you telling us? That we're going to worship you? Or we're going to serve you? You're already sitting in that place where Dad has you at, and he's giving you all this stuff, and now you're trying to tell us what we're going to do? Like, they look at it very badly. In fact, even some of these brothers aren't from the wives that he initially took, right? So he initially wanted Rachel. He got Leah. They compete with each other because Leah's having the children first. Rachel isn't, and she gives him his handmaiden. So now he's having children from the girls that are working for her. And then finally, Rachel gets pregnant with Joseph, and then finally, she gets pregnant with Benjamin. But before that, he's having children all down the line. And a lot of them are looking at probably want what Joseph has, the attention of their dad, everything that he has, and yet he is he's giving it to Joseph, and they aren't really fully the children that he initially planned to be with, right? The moms that he planned to be with. So they're probably looking at like, hey, I'm a stepchild, or I'm this, and he doesn't really look at me the same way he looks at Joseph or any of the others, because I have a different kind of mom. So on top of this, how it relates to Christ, right? Is I mean, I even to this day, you have Judaism, and you have those that are refusing to acknowledge or see that Jesus is the Messiah. And in the time of Jesus in the New Testament, you have scribes, Pharisees, the high priest, the chief priest. You have the religious sect of the time, and they were refusing to acknowledge that Jesus was favored by God. And here he is performing miracles, has a big following of the people. He's making this claim that he is the Son of God, and they are refusing him. They are rejecting him. They are bitter towards him. Overall, they end up sentencing him to die, finding a way to kill him. All similarities that happens in Joseph's story, and God has been telling us the end from the beginning. So Joseph has this dream. He tells them the dream. They don't like the dream. They don't like who he is. They don't like what he stands for. His dad, right, goes to tell him one day to go check on his brothers. Jesus spoke a lot in parables. He even makes parables mention about him going into the field or going into the vineyard and what they do to him. One of them, this is the heir, let's kill him. He's making stories that are saying that he sent prophets to speak to him. He sent other people to speak to him. This is one parable about the vineyard. Overall, they take the son and they kill him. Now, what's he going to do when he comes back? What's his dad going to do when he comes back, right? And that's kind of a lot of the similarities and questions and things that are happening here in Jesus. He goes to the field. He goes to check on his brothers. The brothers don't like that he has judgment. He has the ability to say good or bad on their part, right? He's going to give a bad report. If you were to die and you were to stand before God, God has the authority to cast judgment on you. Were you this or were you that? And you don't want that bad report. They don't want that bad report given back to their dad, right? They would love to be honored by him. They feel like they're not receiving that. They do feel like Joseph is getting it. So when they see him, they're already making plans to kill him. The religious sect of the time, same thing with Jesus. So he goes to see his brother, and what do? They end up taking his coat of many colors, right? They strip him of his coat. They take, here, Son of God, now you're no longer this. It's like trying to take that away from you, by putting you in the grave, right? Jesus put him in the grave. And they cast him into the pit, right? It's a pit without water. Water is a source of life. You need water to live. You can only live a few days without water, right? You can live a little bit longer without food, but not very long without water. And here he is in a pit without life, right? A grave. Kind of reminds me of the pit when they rolled the stone on top of it. But here he is in the pit. Ishmaelite slave traders are coming by, and Judah gets the idea to sell him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. You see a connection here that Judas in the story of the Gospels is the one that betrayed or turned Jesus over for 30 pieces of silver. There's a connection here. It was Judah's idea. It's Judas' idea in this other story. What's interesting is they're also carrying spices, right? It says that they're carrying uh, like myrrh and I believe they said frankincense. They may have said one or the other, but they're carrying balm and frankincense and myrrh. Well, Jesus was when you had the nativity story and the three wise men come to see who they follow the signs in the heavens, who's going to be the king of the Jews, and they're bringing gold, there's royalty, and frankincense and myrrh. So you have spices. I believe one was used as like kind of like an embalming type spice for death, and so they have their frankincense and they have their myrrh. Also, they're taking him away into Egypt. That's where they're going to carry him into. Christ, at the time that King Herod was going to find out who is this king of the Jews, right? Who is this other person that's threatening my kingdomship? And he goes and searches for him. An angel of the Lord came to Joseph. Now, this is Mary's Joseph in the New Testament, in a dream, and warns him to take the child, and they go into Egypt, right? So here is Jesus. Here's Joseph in this story, and he's going into Egypt. Now, in the story of Jesus, he comes back out of Egypt, right? Because he says, "Out of Egypt have I called my son," which Egypt represents the world when you get into the Exodus story. And I believe that you can read it like this: "I called you out of the world. Out of Egypt have I called my son." I've called you out of the world. And we, as followers of Christ, this is what we do. We're no longer the old selves. We're no longer our old selves, because God has called us out of that life and called us to follow him in righteousness. So at the end of Genesis chapter 50, Joseph is going to call the children of Israel to come live with him in this land of Egypt. But it's for a time, because this isn't the actual promised land that God had promised the descendants of Israel, the descendants of Abraham, right? So in the story of the Exodus, the second book of the Bible, right? Because we're about to, when we finish Genesis, you start Exodus. That's the story of Moses in Egypt and how they Exodus, how they exit out of Egypt, right? Out of Egypt have I called my son. They came into the world, they're called out of the world. And so there is a lot of similarities here on Christ all throughout this passage. And so here Joseph is sold as a slave to Potiphar in Egypt. And that's how pretty much the story of Genesis chapter 37 ends, right? He goes into Egypt, he's sold as a slave. Interesting that he's sold by the Ishmaelite slave traders, because if you go into Abraham's story, he has two sons. He has he has Ishmael first, then he has Isaac. Ishmael was the son born into bondage, right? Sarah couldn't have children at the time, so she says, "Why don't you sleep with my handmaid?" Doesn't that sound familiar? Like there's repetitive stories here. God's trying to tell us something. But he says, "Why don't you sleep with my handmaid and raise up a child to him?" Right? Maybe that's the son of the promise. And he does that. He sleeps with Hagar, her handmaiden, and has a child who is Ishmael. Later, she has Isaac. Can't stand Hagar or Ishmael. Their behavior, they think they're better. They were doing a lot of stuff, and she tells Abraham to cast him away. He doesn't want to at first, but he asks God, and God says, "Heed to your wife. Listen to her. Put him away." And so they pack up Ishmael and they send him and Hagar, and they go on their way. They were cast out. They weren't the child of the promise. To me, this is telling us a message, because if you look in the story of Adam and Eve who disobeyed God, right, who brought us into bondage of sin, were cast out of paradise. They were cast out of the kingdom, right? To me, it's telling us a message. If you are following your life of sin, if you are not following God, the promise, if you're not following him as Lord, then you will be cast out. The old man or the old you needs to die. The old you needs to be cast out, to be born again, to follow the Lord. Those are the two sons. Our first life in bondage to sin, and our second when we come to know who Christ is. The blessing went to Isaac. The blessing goes to Christ. We're following the Lord. Our old life perished, cast out. We cast it out by following the Lord, and if you don't do it by following the Lord, He's going to do it when the time comes. He's going to separate those who are following Him from those who are not. And so to me, it's interesting that it's the Ishmaelites that are slave traders that are bringing him into bondage. Christ was sinless. He who knew no sin became sin so that we can have the righteousness of God. He who knew no sin, Christ was sinless. He knew no sin. He became sin. He put on bondage for our sake, right? If you look in John chapter 8, Jesus makes this statement: whoever sins is a slave to sin, which tells me the answer that if you sin, you are stuck in bondage. You are bound to sin. You are in bondage to sin. And Israel was in bondage in the story of Egypt, right? Ishmael was the son of the bondservant. You know, it's a big message, big story. It's telling us a bigger picture. And we have been liberated from our bondage because what Christ did. I'll tell you what, I'm almost going 30 minutes on here. I'm going to start chapter 39 here in the next video, but I pray that you learned a lot just over the recap of 37 and 38. So God bless you. I hope you have a great day in the Lord. I pray that you're learning a lot from God. And if you feel like this has helped you in any way, you feel like you're growing in God's Word, just with this fellowship that we're having, then I pray that you share that with someone. You can share, like, subscribe, share this on with someone. If you aren't able to do that and you still have God's Word in you, and I highly encourage you always daily, if you have somebody that you're speaking with that you feel the Lord leading you to speak out more on His behalf to them, do so. God isn't just meant for us. It's meant to go forward. God anoints us with the Holy Spirit. He anoints us with His Word. He's given us that talent, and it's meant to be poured into other people. So if you feel God calling you to do so, please do so. Thank you again for following me. On the next video, I'll go through 39, and we'll continue from there. Have a blessed day.